All right, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this webinar on mastering classroom management practical strategies for educators, for European educators. This webinar is organized by the European School Education Platform, which we invite you to take a look at your earliest convenience. My colleague Marta will post all of the necessary links in the chat, and please join us on the last webinar of the year. And we hope that you will leave feeling empowered with a lot of practical strategies for managing diverse and dynamic classrooms, drawing on contemporary research and proven best practices. This session will provide you with culturally responsive tools to foster a positive, inclusive, and engaging learning environment. So without further delay, I will now introduce you to Maria O'Donovan. So Maria is a post-primary visual art educator and PhD researcher dedicated to fostering creativity, sustainability, and innovation in education. With a master's in arts management and a postgraduate qualification in leadership and management in education, she blends academic expertise with practical experience to develop an inclusive and dynamic teaching practice. Maria is also a very experienced eTwinning ambassador and Erasmus Plus project leader, and recognized for her ability to inspire critical thinking and creativity in students while cultivating a very respectful and engaging learning environment. She's a frequent speaker and author, and she shares her insights on arts education, inclusion, project-based learning at national and international events. We are very happy for Maria to be here. So, Maria, the virtual stage is all yours.
Thank you so much, Kira. And thank you to everybody who has come to this webinar this afternoon. I know after a day working that's not always an easy thing to do, so that is really appreciated. And I hope that I'm going to be able to give you some strategies and some approaches that you can take in your classroom. So I am going to begin and share my presentation. And while that's loading, I suppose I just want to say, as an art teacher with lots of experience in classroom management in a subject area and visual arts, it's not always very easy. I aim to bring a unique and invaluable perspective to the webinar. My understanding of both subject-specific teaching practices and broader educational strategies helps me to address classroom management challenges in diverse multicultural settings. I have quite a bit of art education experience, and as an art teacher, I possess an understanding of how to manage a creative and dynamic classroom environment. Art classes in particular often require a balance of structured guidance, but lots of creative freedom. My experience in navigating this balance gives me an ability to create an engaging, respectful and productive learning atmosphere, or so I like to think. Art education also brings with it, diverse student needs from various levels of skill and creativity. But that being said, I must also make a disclaimer before we start. I do not have all the answers, and I would never claim that I always get it right. Sometimes my classroom can be the most mismanaged space that you could imagine. And that's the nature of working with young people. I'm sure you can all agree that it can be unpredictable. Sometimes things do not work, but we need to keep trying different approaches, and what might work one day might not necessarily work the next day. And what might work really well with one group might not work with another at all. So we need to be really flexible and adaptable practitioners. Now, art teachers are particularly good at this. We're trained to be facilitators, and we work in the subject of visual art where things don't always work out. And the process and the trial and the error and the making of mistakes is something to be celebrated. Art doesn't just happen. You cannot just learn it. There's lots of trial and error, experimentation with new ways, new materials and new approaches. And sometimes, as art teachers, we tend to sit back and let things happen. And when things go wrong maybe or don't work out the way we intend or way we expect, as art teachers, and I suppose teachers in general, we reflect and we research and we evaluate and we go again. And that's it. We can all look at classroom management in this way, whether that's an academic subject or a practical subject, whether that's an eTwinning project or extracurricular areas of learning. It is something we can look at. Trial and error, try something. If it works well, try it again, and always be prepared to be flexible and adaptable with our approaches. So this webinar then aims to provide European teachers with effective and culturally aware classroom management strategies that draw on contemporary research, but mostly best practices. Hopefully it will equip teachers with actionable tools to foster a positive, engaging and productive learning environment for diverse classrooms across Europe. So to start off, we are going to do a little Menti. The chat has a link, but if you'd like to go to menti.com, our participation code is 26150434. And I'll leave that on the screen for a few moments before I swap screens. But as a group, we're going to look at why does it matter? Why does classroom management matter to us? And while that's happening, I'm going to share my screen. And hopefully we can all see the clouds that will begin to form here on our Mentimeter. So why does classroom management matter to you as a teacher, as an educator? Peace of mind. Peace of mind is important. While this is happening here, we see inclusion jumping in, structure, a classroom atmosphere. While our word cloud is building here, I'm going to mention a few things for me. Classroom management for me, it matters because it creates a structured but supportive learning environment. Improved results has popped in, learning purposes, structure has come in again. For me also, I find that good classroom management, being organised, minimises the disruptions, but maximises my instructional time or my time working directly with the students, minimising the disruptions. Structure has popped in again, inclusion, pleasure, avoiding conflicts, prevent confusion, belonging, support, reaching the objectives, some absolutely lovely reasons to why classroom management matters to you popping in, tranquility, support, creativity, some fabulous inclusion again has appeared. For me, a third reason that classroom management is important to me is that it fosters really positive teacher-student relationships. And for me, I think having a good relationship with the young people in front of us is so important. Lots of different things adding on to our cloud, preventing confusion again, learning purposes, belonging, supportive, participation. So lots and lots of important things popping in there. So I am going to stop sharing my screen and this word cloud we will include later on and will be made available. But I am going to go back to share my PowerPoint. And for me, I just mentioned as we were typing into our Menti cloud, you can continue to write into that if you so wish. We will share that at a later stage. But for me, as I said, it creates a structured, supportive learning environment. It minimises the disruptions, it maximises my instructional time with the students, and it fosters positive student-teacher relationships. I also find that there's a connection to teacher well-being. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm after jumping on ahead. We're going to look at the impact on student learning first. It is increased engagement and participation. We've got higher academic achievement due to clear expectations and consistent routines. We also look at the development of self-regulation and responsibility that the students have also within the classroom. And I mentioned again, for me, the increased engagement, participation, a supportive, structured learning environment is so important. And minimising disruptions by establishing clear expectations and routines. Our teachers, we can reduce time spent addressing behavioural issues, allowing more time for our instruction. We can foster active participation, collaboration, focus, and we can enable students to grasp and apply concepts maybe more effectively with good classroom management. And another really important thing I feel is that it supports equal opportunity, so that consistent and fair classroom management practices really ensure that all students have an equal opportunity to learn, regardless of their ability, regardless of their background. Also then, and it was mentioned in the Mentimeter about tranquility, pleasure, there is a huge connection between classroom management and the connection to teacher well-being. You know, it can reduce stress from behavioural challenges, enhance our own job satisfaction and professional efficiency, and prevents burnout by fostering that positive classroom atmosphere. Also boosts confidence and encourages longevity in our profession. When teachers implement effective classroom management, students achieve better outcomes, and that was one of the words put into our Mentimeter. Improved results, better outcomes. It fosters a sense of accomplishment as well for both teacher and the learners. A positive classroom climate is established where mutual respect and enthusiasm drive that learning process, and that's what's embedded in the relationship between teacher and students. And by doing that, the teacher's role becomes far more rewarding, much more manageable, and creates this virtuous cycle that benefits everybody involved. So let's look towards understanding classroom management and what it is. So I have some key concepts. I have them numbered 1 to 4. So what is classroom management to begin? Well, classroom management refers to the techniques, the strategies and the skills that us teachers can use to create and maintain an organised, productive and respectful learning environment. An effective classroom management ensures that students can then focus on their learning, foster positive behaviours and minimise the disruptions, which we cannot, discuss enough. Fostering positive behaviours, minimise the disruptions. That is the best way to manage your classroom, is to be organised, to have our, moving beyond having to worry or focus on discipline within the classrooms, but creating that environment from the start that's conducive to learning. So here we're going to look at understanding classroom management and the role that can play in student engagement, behaviour and achievement. And again, they are the key words that popped up within our Mentimeter. When we move to key concept 3, we look at the core components of effective classroom management. So those core components are structure versus flexibility. So we still need to be flexible. We need to be aware that from day to day, some things work, some things won't work, depending on the type of day we're having. Maybe some of our students have had a tougher morning at home before they left. We need to be flexible. We need to be aware, but we can still have structure while doing that. We need to be really clear with our expectations, and we need to be really consistent with our students. We need to build relationships with our students. That's really, really important. And we need to have student autonomy and participation. Our students, our young people, are able to make decisions for themselves, and they really need to be involved in the decision-making process and included very much so in the creation of effective classroom management strategies. And we'll look at that as we move through the webinar. Finally, then, we need to understand classroom management from the area of being culturally responsive. We need to recognise the importance of adapting management practices to the diversity of students that are across our European classrooms. And we need to be aware as well of all the different scenarios, all the different backgrounds, and all the different situations that each of our students may be in. And to do that, we need to move beyond discipline. Classroom management isn't really just about maintaining order. It's about creating a space where our students feel safe and valued and motivated to learn. Effective classroom managers are proactive. I suppose they anticipate the disruptions before they occur, and not by exerting control or losing our temper or flying off the handle, as we say here, but by creating an engaging environment where the misbehaviours or the classroom management issues are less likely to arise. And the modern approach to that, that is grounded in theory and grounded in research, is building positive relationships with students, establishing expectations and that sense of community. Because when our students, when they feel respected and included, they are far more likely to respect the classroom norms, our classroom rules, or our classroom day-to-day workings. Teacher-student relationships have a much greater impact on classroom management than disciplinary techniques. So when we look at classroom management, we should look at moving beyond discipline. That is really important. And to do that, there's a number of different ways where we can look at the role of classroom management rather than just for discipline, but to look at engagement. Engagement is far more important than discipline will ever be. So engagement, according to research, engagement has 3 dimensions. It has behavioural, emotional, and cognitive engagement. So classroom management then plays a critical role in all 3. By setting clear routines, teachers reduce the uncertainty that students have, and that would help students to focus on learning rather than navigating, chaos. For example, a simple strategy like greeting students at the door, that can increase your emotional engagement with your students. And you're building a rapport and constantly building a relationship with your students. And then when maybe some discipline issues arise within your classroom, it's much easier to address that student again, just as you had earlier in the class when they entered, and call them by name. For example, Maria, is everything okay today? Or something like that, and try and nip any discipline issues in the bud as you may start to see them, and engage with the student. Make the student feel welcome, make them feel ready to participate. And then other simple strategies you could look at would be activating learning strategies, some group work or project-based learning that can further enhance behavioural engagement, because they are actively required to contribute and collaborate. So again, engagement is really important. Engage with the students on all 3 levels: behavioural, emotional, and cognitive. When we look at the role of classroom management in behaviour, it can reduce our disruptive behaviour by prevention rather than reaction. A well-structured classroom environment provides clear boundaries. It offers students a sense of autonomy, and studies demonstrate that when students are explicitly taught expectations and are positively reinforced for meeting those expectations, the behavioural issues decline significantly. So again, being positive, teaching what our expectations are. At the start of the class, let students know what you expect when they're working in groups or in pairs. For example, today, students are going to work in groups of 4, and I expect in that group of 4, you are going to achieve this, 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 and this, and we are going to carry out that work in a manner that allows everybody in the classroom to work in their own groups. So that would be behaviour. Nip the behaviour issues, the disruptive behaviour in the bud, rather than waiting to have a reaction. And finally, achievement. And this was also mentioned within the Mentimeter. Achievement is perhaps the most compelling argument for effective classroom management because it impacts on our academic outcomes. And at the end of the day, we're all here teaching. We're here to teach our students different subject areas, different topics, and we are working to curriculums. So achievement is really, really important, and those academic outcomes. Now, research has identified that classroom management is one of the most influential factors affecting student learning, more than the teacher subject knowledge or design. And why? Again, we go back to a supportive, orderly environment. So consider this. Our disruptive classroom, it steals time from instruction. And studies estimate that an average teacher loses about 5 to 9 minutes of instructional time every hour to disruptions. And over a year, that's about 4 or 5 weeks of lost learning. So effective classroom management gives that time back to the students. We do not lose so much time to disruptions. So we have to start thinking about how we are going to stop losing time to disruptions. But before we do so, we're going to look and understand the European context a little bit more and what this means in terms of multicultural classrooms, multilingual settings, implications for classroom management, flexible approaches, professional development, and community and collaboration. So again, we're going to move to this quite quickly because we really want to start to look at the strategies that we can use to manage our classrooms so much better. So we can facilitate awareness and facilitate engagement, creating a focused environment for discussing our history, our culture, and our values, enabling exploration of topics like EU institutions and policies. We can encourage collaboration. We can promote inquiry and promote reflection. We can support digital and language skills. We can provide the global perspective. We need to empower our teachers and we need to empower our students. It's really important for good classroom management, for European and e-twinning projects, because it plays a vital role in ensuring the success of those projects. Structured collaboration, clear roles and responsibilities, ensuring students understand the tasks collaboratively with international peers. Our time management, allocating sufficient time for project milestones and virtual exchanges without disrupting our regular coursework. Our effective communication through respectful interactions, which are crucial when working with diverse cultures and different languages. And we need to prepare our students to adhere to online etiquette in digital collaborations. And that is really important for e-twinning and European projects. Our classroom management and our project management must be on point for these things to happen. Again, we ensure engaged participation. We have a problem-solving environment. We need to promote skill development. And again, we go back to improve teacher and student well-being. And again, all really, really important for our e-twinning and European projects. Now, let's start to look at the big picture. Let's look at a holistic approach and start to look at some of the strategies that we can use. So consistency matters. Clearly established routines provide the structure. And I feel I have said that probably 40 times since this webinar started. And consistency is what matters. So the same rules apply today that applied yesterday, that apply tomorrow. That our students have an expectation. Students then who are engaging, that are actively involved in the learning, are less likely to disrupt. Also what we've mentioned. And that means us as educators and us as teachers must be prepared with our lessons. We must be prepared with additional work, maybe for students who have finished the task early. We must be prepared to have students, maybe research some additional points in relation to the topic we're trying to cover, so that students that maybe are finished early are have an additional task, so they're not left unengaged. We also need to look to the students who may find it more difficult to complete a task in time, and we need to have a simplified version available or an adaptation to that lesson for those students, to ensure that all our students are engaged and everything is in line with the abilities and skills that our students have in front of us, our diverse classrooms. And this is my favourite one, relationships. They are foundational. When the students trust their teachers, they're more motivated to meet those expectations and achieve their very, very best. So moving on to the management strategies, the practical classroom management strategies. We are going to look at some preventative strategies. We're going to look at establishing clear rules, routines, and expectations very early on with our students. We're going to set up both physical and virtual classrooms that promote focus and engagement. We will use visuals in our classroom. We can use multimodal communication tools to support diverse learners, and particularly in our multilingual classrooms. For positive enforcement and engagement, we're going to start using praise and rewards effectively to encourage desired behaviours. We're going to incorporate active learning strategies to maintain our interest and focus of students. We're also going to look at some practical examples of engaging students with group work, discussions, and hands-on activities. Moving on to our number 3, we're going to look at building trust and rapport. And we're going to stress and highlight the importance of forming strong, positive relationships with students. Strategies for learning about cultural backgrounds, interests, and needs. Using culturally relevant materials and approaches to make all students feel valued and included. And then we're going to look at how to address the disruptive behaviours early. We're going to look at tools for managing classroom conflict. And we're going to look at restorative practices and non-punitive discipline techniques. And that's it. As educators, we need to reflect on our own practice. Things that work, things that don't work. Take note of what works. And then evaluate why something or why some approach did not work. So let us look at some ways to look at language support in terms of classroom management. Simplifying our communication is really, really going to be helpful for us. We can use visual aids. We can use YouTube links. We can use Spotify music. We can create visuals. We can use a visualizer if we have them. We can use any amount of tools. We can use Mentimeters, and we can use word clouds, and we can use little quizzes. We can use lots and lots of visual aids to help students and prevent issues surrounding language, to support language that will help our classroom management be more effective. A really important one, I find, a strategy that works really well is encouraging peer support. In my classrooms, students do not always need to feel that they need to ask me for support. They are more than willing to turn left or right to their classmates, to their peers, and ask those students for assistance. My classroom is a very social environment, and visual art lends itself to that, but our classrooms can be social environments. Students can, maybe ask, particularly in group work or pair work, lean to their own peers for that support if necessary. And for language support, having translations tools available. If we're working in schools where we have lots of different students from lots of different backgrounds with lots of different languages within our classrooms, providing translation tools through Microsoft Word, these all help to engage students, prevent the discipline issues, and move beyond that idea of classroom management being looked at from a discipline point of view. Moving on to control, acknowledging our cultural differences. We need to have a safe base for our students. Our students need to be able to come into a classroom. They need to be able to feel safe to make mistakes, safe to try new things, to learn, to ask questions. We need to have that space for students. We need to build a rapport with our students. And again, something as simple as saying hello at the door, using our students' names, all helps with creating that space. Again, celebrating the diversity, also really, really important to be aware of the diverse young people that are in front of us. When we look at adapting teacher strategies, we look at offering flexible instruction, scaffolding students' learning, and using varied methods for assessment and using varied methods for teaching and learning within the class. When we look at assessing understanding, we can look at using some non-verbal assessments. And we mentioned scaffolding learning and varied methods. Not all assessments have to be verbal. We can provide alternative methods. So we can include maybe oral presentations, we can include poster design, we can use art or music, we can use lots of different methods for assessment within our classrooms that can reach out to all learners and really help provide alternative methods, help us to check for student comprehension, and adapt our teaching strategies that will in turn support and scaffold our classroom management. Again, I come back to building relationships and fostering inclusion. And I come back to building relationships constantly. My students in my classroom, they call me by my first name, Maria, and I call them by their first name. And that is something that I do within my classroom. I meet my students at the door, I welcome them by name, or if they come in a group, I'll welcome, good morning, girls, or good morning, you know, if there's maybe 2 or 3 students. Throughout the class, as I'm talking to my students, I will refer to them by name. And when students want to ask me questions, they refer to me by name also. They may call me, Maria, can you help me with this? Or Maria, is it possible for me to do this? And it's building that relationship and engaging that is really, really important. Again, building that relationship also, you know, insists that we should show cultural empathy, build trust, build those connections and get to know the young people in front of us. I'm really lucky. I work in a small school now. I've spent the last 9 years working in a small school with 120 pupils. So I know all of those pupils very, very well. I know every student that comes into my classroom every day. I meet them outside of school and I will stop and I will talk if they want to. I have built a 10-year relationship with my students as they move through my school. But even working in much larger schools with over 1,000 students in the past, I have, made it, I suppose, a key goal of mine to be aware and to learn and to be familiar with every student in my classroom, be able to refer to them by name, and not to be looking at a roll sheet to try and find who I have in front of me or to try and work out who my students are. When you have that relationship with students, classroom management becomes so much easier. And then there's other things we can do to foster inclusion and help classroom management issues within our classroom. We can foster inclusion and we can implement buddy systems. We can promote community building. But it is really important to clearly outline the expectations. And for me, I have my students at the start of the year design a classroom contract that when maybe not everything is followed or completed to the best of the ability. In my room, quite often, a lot of the cleaning for the art materials at the end of class isn't completed. Generally, what I have issues there with classroom management is, kind of coming to the end of the class, students know that, if that work is not done or if there is issues maybe within the classroom, they know what the outcomes are. The students have been involved in creating we won't call them punishments, but involved in creating the things that need to be done to make up for classroom management problems. So that can include things like, additional classroom chores. In our classroom, everyone is responsible for the upkeep of our classroom, for keeping it neat and tidy. So I add that. That is one of the things. Students will work on a rota, but they may get an extra day on the rota. And students have agreed to that. The contract has been laid out. Some of our rules in the art room involve particular usage of particular materials, and students know that they have an expectation that they need to be trained for each material they use, and we sign our contract. And that is really important. It sets the expectations, they're clearly outlined, and when those expectations are broken, the students know what the outcome is. And again, that is really about teacher organisation. Us as teachers, we need to be organised. If we are going into a classroom, we need to look at establishing proactive classroom management. We need our clear expectations. We need to use positive reinforcement, and we need consistent routines. And that is a huge step within our classroom management strategy. And that is what we have to look at. We need to be prepared. We also need to be consistent. We need to have, if we have 15 students in front of us, we need to have 15 sets of, whatever it is we might need for that class. We need to have enough for everybody. We need to have our photocopies, or we need to have our handouts prepared. So we need to have our students having a good example from us that we are at our class on time as teachers, that we are prepared, we are set up, and we are ready to teach in the hope that students are ready to learn. So again, looking at our own approach, our own organisation, that is the best example that you are going to give your students. Looking at other preventative strategies then, sometimes things go very, very wrong. And I, more than anyone, am familiar with that. But we need to, in that case, monitor student behaviour. That we are circulating regularly within the classroom to prevent the issues, that we're not sitting behind a desk all day or all during the lesson while students sit in front of us. So by using our get up and move around approach, we move from our main table or where we're presenting, and we move through the classroom. We move between the students, we talk to the students, and we're regularly, I suppose, circulating. That prevents any issues arising. Using our non-verbal cues are really important. So using eye contact or hand gestures that would address minor disruptions without causing a 5-minute disruption in the classroom. Something like, "Oh, Maria," or "Maria, is everything okay?" Or maybe an eye contact, just a little look that might help minimize the disruption without it becoming an exasperated issue. And then we can engage the students actively using varied interactive methods that will help our students to be engaged, so that they're not sitting there bored, that they're not sitting there without work to do, and they're active in their own learning, and that if they finish a task, they're happy to move on to maybe add a bit extra or whatever needs to be done in that regard. So engaging our students with the work, making sure that our lesson plans are adequate for our classrooms. Looking at de-escalation techniques then when things go wrong, we really need to look at remaining calm and composed when addressing disruptive behaviour. We can't fall into chaos. We cannot let our classroom become chaotic in that. We shouldn't get involved in an argument with a student. We need to start using I statements. So address the behaviour without accusing the student or sounding accusatory. So I think, or I feel, or using things like that you are bringing it back to yourself as opposed to accusing the student. That kind of approach will really help in a disciplinary situation. It will help to prevent a large argument or chaos to break out. And giving students some space and time, give them a few minutes before addressing any issues always helps, and it always helps me also, because sometimes under time pressure, under duress, when there's a whole group looking at it, sometimes we can get involved in an argument, we get sucked in even without meaning to. So sometimes I like to use the approach where I'll say to a student that maybe is contributing to some disruptions, I would say something like, "Maria, we're going to have a chat about this later in the afternoon," or "Maria, I think we should have a chat later this afternoon or later in the class." So that would be a good way to give a bit of space and a bit of time to students. Address them by name. Again, let them know that you're speaking directly to them. You're not accusing of anything, but you are trying to give students and yourself the space and the time that you need to cool down before addressing the issue. Then we need to look, if things do escalate, and look, indeed, sometimes they do, we need to look at conflict resolution strategies. And that includes private conversations that address the conflict privately. It reduces the embarrassment for that student. We don't know what's going on in students' backgrounds quite a lot of the time, and we need to be aware and we need to be understanding of that also. And that doesn't mean that we let inappropriate behaviour slide. We just need to be aware. We can all have bad days, teachers included. But, you know, addressing a conflict privately is a much better approach, if that can happen at all. Active listening is important. Listen to all parties that are involved and try and understand their perspective. And sometimes students may say, well, in this class, I felt I couldn't do the task. And then you can, you know, level with the students and talk and say, well, okay, I'll take that on board. The next day I will try something different. Or the next day I will have something additional for you, or, you know, and try and have a conversation about it, and build that relationship with your student for that to happen. And that helps us with, you know, developing a problem solving approach, that we can, I suppose, encourage our students to find solutions to the conflict with the teacher, that we can, you know, work together. And that, looking at restorative conversations, you know, looking at reflection and empathy instead of punishment. Ask the students, well, why did you feel, you know, why did you feel today that you had to blurt out in the classroom? Or why did you feel today that you had to walk out of the classroom? And make it a conversation, a reflective, you know, and more empathetic approach rather than that of punishment. And create an action plan if things really are not going to plan, that work with the students to create a plan that might prevent future conflict or future disruptions or behavioural issues in our classroom. And by doing that, we're giving students individual attention. That's identifying then maybe any underlying causes of disruptive behaviour. And if our students feel that they have rapport and our students feel, you know, comfortable talking to us, that maybe we might find out that there is a reason for disruptive behaviour. And we can set up contracts with our students then that might target behaviour improvement. So we might, we have a point system in our school, and where students, if they display positive behaviours, they get green points. And a number of green points means that they get a reward or a treat. We can use these within our classrooms, the same level of targeting and behaviour contracts to improve behaviour, improve classroom management. And then if we do have ongoing issues, involving parents early and collaborating with the parents and working with support staff in our school is really, really important. And we've mentioned in understanding individual differences. We've mentioned this afternoon differentiating instruction and expectations. We've mentioned as teachers, we need positive reinforcement and we need consistent expectations. We need an inclusive environment. We need self-regulation and autonomy. We need students to be able to make their own decisions as well and to be part of that conversation. We need to collaborate with our support staff, particularly for special educational needs, that can help us with students who do require additional support and help provide tailored strategies for specific challenges. Peer mentoring is a good one, where stronger students can be partnered with a student who may need additional support, encouraging collaboration and building empathy within the classroom. And finally, this is my big one, looking at reflecting and adjusting. As teachers, as educators, we need to be taking part in ongoing reflection, assessing how our strategies are working for our individual students. Be open to adjusting our approaches based on what's effective or ineffective. We need to reflect on how organised we are ourselves. We need to reflect on our own time management. Our students cannot be expected to manage themselves if we can't manage ours. Asking our students for feedback about what might help them learn and manage their own behaviour in the classroom is really important as well. And that will help you make informed adjustments. So we're going to look at our 4 key takeaways again. Our classroom management is much more than just discipline. It's creating an environment where our students are respected, engaged, and empowered to learn. Our proactive strategies, which are our relationship building and being culturally responsive in teaching, are essential in the diverse classrooms. Our effective management requires flexibility, our reflection and adaptation. And our tools are clear expectations, our positive reinforcement and restorative practices can manage the behaviour and the positive learning atmosphere. Now, before we finish up, we are going to look at doing a quick Kahoot, which will take just a few moments. I'm going to share my Kahoot. It should really just take us less than 3 minutes. So I'm going to switch my screen. And I think Marta is going to put our code into the chat. And you'll all go to kahoot.it. And we'll go for classic mode. And start. Hello, Carmen. And Ali, I'm sorry, I hope I don't mispronounce the names that are popping into our game chat. Mary. Emmy, hello. Eleonora, hello. Alida and Demi, welcome. Salva, Nermina, Maria, hello. Now we have 18 players. I'm just going to give it 30 seconds more. And anyone that is not within the game, I'm almost certain you can continue to add in afterwards. You can continue to join afterwards. But we're going to imagine we're designing our own classroom management approach. This quiz is going to get you to evaluate a couple of scenarios and choose strategies for handling real world challenges. And our responses will help us identify our own strengths and our own areas for growth. So we have 25 players. I'm going to go ahead and we're looking at classroom management. And our first question is a quiz scenario-based question. You have planned a highly structured lesson, but pupils want to discuss a related current event. How would you respond? Would you like to stick rigidly to the lesson plan, allocate 10 minutes for discussion, allow pupils to discuss the event freely, or turn the entire lesson into a guided lesson? So allocate 10 minutes for the discussion and return to the plan. We're going to skip through the results very quickly, but we're going to reflect on the correct answer. We would allocate 10 minutes for the discussion and return to the plan. Why? Because this balances structure and flexibility. And while A, sticking rigidly to the plan, sacrifices student engagement, and C, turning into the entire lesson into a discussion would derail your planned objectives, B, strikes a productive balance. And we're going to move quite quickly because I know I am running out of time. So in this second question, choose the management classroom strategy that would be most effective in building a positive relationship with students. Greeting students at the door, learning and using the student's name, providing individual feedback, or praising the entire class equally. And our answer is learning and using the students' names. And that is something that I have mentioned 3 or 4 times within the lesson. That is not to say that many of the others all have their own advantages, but learning and using the student's name shows personal recognition, it shows respect, and that fosters our strong individual connection and builds our trust. And this simple gesture makes students feel valued and seen. Now, how would you involve students in setting classroom expectations? I'm going to move quite quickly to this. I'm going to give you the answer and you'll have the access to this later on because I do want to give us some time for questions. One effective way to involve students in setting classroom expectations is to hold a class discussion or brainstorming session at the very beginning of the term. And during this session, students would ask what kind of behaviours and attitudes they believe would help the class to run smoothly, encourage them to reflect on what would help them to learn best, create a list of shared expectations as a group, and then our students have ownership over classroom rules. And our final question is, what is the biggest benefit of having clear expectations in your own classroom? So does that save instructional time, encourage fairness and trust, reduce uncertainty, or all of the above? And I know there are 8, 9, 10 answers, but I'm going to skip us on because we are out of time and we have all of the above. All of the above is really important because clear expectations provides multiple benefits. It saves time, it reduces uncertainty, and it encourages fairness and trust. Now, we have very little time, so I'm going to escape from this. I'm going back to our PowerPoint, and at this stage, I'd like to open the floor for any questions that we might have.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Maria. I'm just going to quickly share my screen so that we all can see what we are doing. We are receiving many positive comments in the chat, so everyone is very, very happy with this webinar. Everybody was super engaged. We didn't even have a lot of chat interaction. I think everyone was very, very focused on what you were saying, so that is lovely. And also just to say that, yeah, thank you so much for the inspiring presentation. I think as a teacher myself, I learned a lot, and as did the participants. We don't have a lot of time for questions. However, let's do one question anyway. Starting this, yeah, trying to improve your classroom management, trying to improve the atmosphere in the classroom. What are some of the common missteps that teachers go through when they start making these changes, just so that maybe we can prevent the twinning teachers from making the same ones?
Yeah, well, what I find is sometimes trying everything together. You know, sometimes when we are trying to be organized for our classrooms and ensure we have all the materials we need, and we're also trying to meet everybody at the door, and we're trying to get everything set up, and we're trying to, stick to an agenda and get the learning outcomes in one go, trying all of that together can be overwhelming for the teacher. So sometimes maybe it's better to start with one thing and for 1 week implement one thing. And then when we're comfortable with that and it's no longer daunting or a challenge, we move to the next thing and we implement the next strategy. So whether that is greeting students at the door, whether that is, ensuring, or working on our time management, our own classroom organization, working in small bits And very much like an e-twinning project, when we start with our first e-twinning project, we just do small projects. We try small strategies and we build on that. And that is so important as teachers, that we don't overwhelm ourselves with taking on, there are almost 30 different strategies in those charts within the PowerPoint. We can't try 30 things all in one go. And what we do is maybe start at the top of the list, and this week we'll try using non-verbal assessment. And then when we have that becoming, commonplace in our class, and we move on and we try something else and we try and build on it and add to it. And I think that is the only way it can work for us as teachers, without burnout, without being overwhelmed.
Wonderful, and a very useful comment. Slow and steady wins the race, as we like to say.
For sure.
Wonderful. Well, thank you again, Maria. Thanks again in the first place for accepting the invitation, and more so for sharing all of your expertise and knowledge. Before we officially close this session, just a bit of practical information. The evaluation form has been shared by my colleague Marta in the chat, so please save this link and fill it in after the webinar has concluded. The second is about our upcoming professional development offer. We have some courses and webinars up and coming, so please visit the course catalog on the European School Education platform at your earliest convenience to not miss any exciting opportunities. And thank you for joining us today, and many thanks to Maria. In the e-twinning webinars, we have this little custom where we like to leave the floor to our speakers for a final word, a final suggestion, or a final wrap-up to share. Maria, what can you share? What can you leave us with?
I'm going to leave us today with just one quote, and it's a quote by L.R. Nost, and it says, "When young people, or when little people, are overwhelmed by big emotions, it is our job to share our calm and not join in their chaos." And I think that is what, as teachers, that is what we want to do. We want our students to be comfortable. We want to create a calm environment for everybody. We want to share that environment, and we do not want to add to the chaos. Unfortunately, classroom management does not always work. I said this at the very start. Sometimes things goes wrong. Sometimes we're having a bad day. Students are having a bad day. Something is happening within the school environment that is different. And when our young people have, emotions, big emotions, overwhelmed, it's our job to share our calmness, not join in their chaos.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Maria, and to leave us with that. Thank you very much. And thank you all to the participants for joining today. I wish you all a wonderful rest of your week, and also already very happy holidays and a wonderful start to the next year. And we hope to see you all in 2025 for our first webinars there. Thank you, and have a wonderful afternoon, everybody. Goodbye.
Goodbye. Thank you so much.